Hi everyone, welcome back to the Support the Spectrum channel. Today we're going to be talking about the 5th video I ever made on TikTok. This one's a little long. Here it is.
Jimothy, seriously? You've been at that worksheet for 20 minutes. What's going on? What's wrong? You need to calm down and do your work. What's wrong? I don't know. I'm a kid learning a new skill. I'm dealing with intense emotions of confusion and now fear, and you're teaching me it's okay for you to become dysregulated and yell, but not okay for me to become dysregulated and confused. Plus, it's too bright in here and the classroom's loud, and I don't know, I'm working on it. Maybe you could ask me how I need help.
Okay, so many topics to bring up in a skit like this. This was actually the first skit I ever did, and people really felt polarized by this video. There's a lot of things to get into. So, the power of language and trust, the experience of teachers and educators around the world, but specifically in America, the nervous system and regulation. And in the caption, I got into the difference between encouragement and praise a little bit, which is what we're going to talk about today as well. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about why this skit was a little polarizing. I got some comments on TikTok that were positive and some comments of people rolling their eyes, usually older people who didn't experience, let's say, the most ideal educational environments growing up. A lot of times back in the day, it was you did what you were told, and whether or not you were dysregulated, you had to listen to the authority figure. And there's no disrespect to authority figures on this channel. In fact, we're going to be talking a lot about the experience of being an educator from my perspective and from what I've seen in the perspectives of others. But I think any time that you introduce the necessary respect of a younger person, kind of assuming that the character in this skit is a younger person in school, a student, whenever you're advocating for them, it seems as though adults or older people take that personally. Like, why would you consider their perspective when nobody considered my perspective when I was that age? And all I have to say to that is, I'm so sorry that nobody considered your perspective. I'm so sorry that was your experience. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that's not the experience of people growing up today. So yes, this is a hard conversation to have, but we're going to start off with what I know best, the power of language, and specifically the power of language when you're building trust. Our words are very powerful. I don't know if I need to belabor that point, but the opposite of trust is actually anxiety. So when somebody cannot trust you fully, they have an anxious attachment to you. Whether that is a caregiver, an educator, or just a friend, someone in your environment, you want to make sure that the communication, the language, the word choices that you're using with someone is one that is building trust and secure attachment. This is so important because trust and secure attachment are the hallmarks of learning. There are, of course, going to be moments when an educator or caregiver is dysregulated. We're going to talk about that more in just a second. But if you were to be dysregulated and speak to a learner with a certain tone or with language that can be perceived as negative, you instantly crack that trust. And everyone is allowed moments where they're not their best selves. I'm not saying that you have to be perfect at all times, but making sure that when you're not, there is a genuine apology and a genuine redemption, and trying to ask that person what you can do to make things better between you and them. Making one negative statement, negative tone, negative choice of words to a learner needs a lot of positive reinforcements to make that go away, if that makes sense. So if you're educating someone and you are protecting their cognition, you are building synapses and neural pathways for them to learn whatever skill or behavior, and you decide that one day you're going to have a negative tone or negative language, or it just comes out in a dysregulated moment, you are increasing anxiety and decreasing the ability to learn anything new. This fact is something that the older generation has a hard time grasping. In a way, education was militant back in the day. Even for people like my parents, it was you respect your authority figures, even if they're in the wrong, and you don't really want to get in trouble at school because you're going to get in trouble at home too. And did people learn in those environments? Absolutely. But did they learn in a survival response with repetition? Or did they learn in an authentic, validating way? Using a negative tone, yelling, or using negative language, does it get the results that you desire at times? Yes. Certainly, if someone is yelling instruction to you, you are motivated to get that thing done because you kind of are being attacked, but it's not genuine learning. It's a survival response. And of course, you might get used to that attack and you may have enough repetition in that survival response that you do genuinely learn to do it and can replicate it on your own. And some research suggests that that does happen faster than neurodiversity affirming practices, but you've caused so much anxiety in the learner. You've potentially traumatized the learner. You don't really know how that individual's brain is going to react to that negative yelling, word choice, tone, whatever it is. So wouldn't you want to take the time to create a positive learning environment for your learners? This is also another reason we need to talk about the true, real experience of educators, because we just talked about time. The next thing I have on my list is the strife of being an educator. You are working against the clock. You are working within the confines of curriculum. You're working within the confines of your administration, the resources you have access to, and the parents you have to deal with sometimes. I don't think it's a controversial thing to say or anything new to say that the experience of being an educator is really hard. In my experience, I worked in the school system for 3 years, and I still consider my position a privilege because even though I had a huge caseload, I was still a speech language pathologist that had to go from classroom to classroom, and I wasn't expected to stay in one classroom all day and really take extended periods of time with the students. I was in with them for a few hours, got done what I needed to get done, and then I had to move on. The experience of being a teacher, especially in a special needs classroom or autism support classroom like I was, is different. And the experience of being a general population educator is different as well. So let's get into the expectations of educators. For general population, you have to be within curriculum requirements and be on time with every lesson plan that you have. Of course, you have to have requirements and curriculum is very important, but it doesn't give the opportunity for students who are at a different pace to excel. It does not give educators enough time to plan. They also have a bunch of people in their classroom, so that's impossible to take into account every student's individual needs and create a course that is the right pacing for them. And it really doesn't matter the age, whether that student is in elementary school or high school, even college. Kids are rowdy, students are rowdy, adolescents are rowdy, and the classroom can get loud. You can get taken over by students. You feel overworked, underpaid. It's a whole nother conversation. and you don't have the resources you need to take care of you and the students. Also, something I experienced is there are, in special needs classrooms specifically, paraprofessionals and some teachers at times that aren't given the proper trainings to care for that population. I am in no way saying that is the paraprofessional or teacher's fault. It's just something that I've seen. I would often have to educate on my own time these people on autism, neurodivergent support, communication support, AAC systems, taking time out of the day that I needed to see the students for language acquisition in order to train. And is that fair? No, because technically it wasn't in my job description. Those people should have been given the resources and support from the beginning. Every single year I worked at the school, there was one classroom that received a new teacher. And in 2 of those years, those teachers were never trained to teach autistic kids. I was in an autism support classroom. What? What a failure from administration. What a failure from the school district. What a failure from the state. I might be getting too ahead of myself here. We're supposed to be focusing on the content of this skit, but it's part of it. It's part of it because, of course, that teacher yells sometimes. Of course, teachers have a tone sometimes. They're tired. They don't know how to handle what is being given to them. And I really commend the teachers who do handle it with such grace, because I can't even say that I would be able to handle it. Not only are you juggling IEPs, special needs, you're juggling caregivers. Caregivers be wanting to be in contact with you throughout the day, knowing what their child is experiencing. And I completely understand that, but it's a lot. It's a lot on the teacher. I have seen a lot of educators burnt out and at their wits' end. And I don't blame them at all for being dysregulated. I'm kind of hesitant to talk about this, but I'm not going to use any names or anything. And again, I don't blame the educator in this instance, but the experience that inspired me to make this TikTok video was a moment where there was an educator working one-on-one with an autistic student. The autistic student was frustrated, was crying, and the educator was laughing and yelling, telling the student that they were able to do this work, but they were being a baby and they were not working hard enough. And it kind of looked like, do it, yelling, dysregulating this student, this child really further. This inspired this skit because I went right up to that educator and I said, this is what you're teaching that student in this moment. That it is okay for you to become dysregulated and yell, but it's not okay for him to become dysregulated and cry and be confused and not learn anything from this experience other than your feelings are more important than his. That was a really hard conversation to have. There were lots of things going on in that educator's life outside of school, but it needed to be said. It's just disrespectful. And I know that in our society especially, we emphasize this idea that kids have it so good, kids get to play all the time, they don't have to pay bills, or some crazy stuff like that. But in all of my life experience, there has never been a harder time for me than when I was a kid. And I still remember that so vividly. I often tell that to my clients that I'm working with, who are usually are adolescents. I explain to them, I know everyone tells you, oh, you should be so happy, you are living this carefree life. That wasn't my experience as a kid. So if that's not your experience either, that's okay. Just think about it for a moment. You lose all autonomy as a kid, especially if you're in certain environments that, you're not being respected. There are certainly some caregivers in schools that really do respect the autonomy of kids, so I'm not talking about them. But I just remember back to my experience as a kid, often being forced in situations that I did not choose, and it felt hard at the time. I personally believe that I might have a bit of pathological demand avoidance, but just so everyone is aware, it's not always the best time for people. Being a kid can really stink sometimes. The choice of what you do day to day is not up to you. Sometimes you are forced into things. Sometimes you have to learn things you don't want to learn. You have to get up at times you don't want to get up. You can't eat when you're hungry. You can't go to the bathroom when you have to go to the bathroom. I would much rather have my life now. I often say this to myself. It's like every year I get happier and happier because I have more control over my life. And we have to think about that when we're educating people of any age, but I'm really thinking about schools here. We have to think about how this person is going to succeed. And is that going to be in an environment where their nervous system is constantly in a survival state? No, it's only going to happen if they have a secure attachment to you, they trust you, and their nervous system is soothed. So going back to the skit, you see that person that I was acting to be, I was really acting as a neurodivergent student, specifically when I talked about the sensory sensitivities around me. And obviously in that survival state, when you're being yelled at and you're confused and things are bright and things are loud, you would not be able to articulate that, hey, you're acting dysregulated, so I should be able to be dysregulated. And can you ask me how you can help me instead of yelling at me and making it worse? And because that neurodivergent student most likely cannot advocate for themselves, that is the reason why I made this video, to advocate for them. Look at this, look at this, look at this. It might be uncomfortable for you to watch as an educator because you may think back to moments where you yourself were dysregulated, but it's not okay. I'm so sorry because I don't want to sound insensitive. I know how hard it is, but you just have to do what is best for them. That's our job, right? And if I was in charge, y'all would make millions a year for raising these students. And then the last thing I want to talk about today is the difference between praise and encouragement. So what is really, really helpful for a learning brain is obviously reducing anxiety, but also providing encouragement rather than providing praise. So in the caption of this video, I had an example. So in this moment, what I would hope an educator would say to Jimothy is, Jimothy, I like how you're not giving up. So it's not a good job, you're doing so great, which is praise. It's specifically pointing out a behavior that Jimothy is presenting with. I like how you're not giving up. It's encouraging that behavior without praising it because you're pointing it out. It seems like this is taking you longer than it usually would, but I love how you're thinking. So again, you're pointing out maybe that negative behavior, or I wouldn't say negative, but that executive functioning deficit, that executive dysfunction, that their attention might be messed up, their organization, their planning might be messed up in that moment. So you're providing clarification that you see that as an educator. I see this is taking longer than it usually would for you, but I love how you're thinking. You're not giving up. Can I help you in any way? Wouldn't that have been a beautiful way to talk about this issue that Jimothy is having, rather than saying, do your work, do your work? How is that going to help? We want to encourage processing time. I go in and I see a lot of daycares. I see a lot of clients in daycare settings. There are certain daycares that are built better than others. Certain daycares that don't have a lot of resources, that have professionals working there who are dysregulated. Oh my goodness, it's like 12 2-year-olds. It can be very dysregulating. I'm not coming for them at all. But the solution a lot of the time is to yell. And if there is someone, okay, I'm going to phrase this way. I do condone yelling in one situation. When someone is in immediate danger, we have to yell. It's okay to send someone into a survival state when they are in danger of hurting themselves or another person. So absolutely, if there was a student climbing the cabinets, climbing the walls, yes, in that moment, we have to yell, most likely. And it's just an instinctual response for us to help them, and we're heightened. So yes. So in moments when the students are not in immediate danger, giving them the processing time to self-correct. And when we're talking about little ones, we can be talking about any age group, obviously, because there are certain processing differences at any age. But just to use the little ones as an example, their brains are soaking in so much. And so sometimes they don't listen, but it's not even, they don't have the ability to be malicious and not listen. They're just not listening because their brain is so experimental and so curious about life around them. It's a really beautiful time. But yes, so yes, there might be an example of, let's say this happened today. We had a student who, they were sitting for lunch and they kept putting their feet on the table. And they thought it was funny to put their feet on the table. But in that moment, the teachers were busy. So I just said, we keep our feet on the ground and our hands on the table. Did I have to say that 10 times for the 2-year-old to respond to it? And did they need the kind of peer pressure of their other peers repeating it and doing that too in order to follow suit? Yes, but peer pressure is okay in this instance. And repetition is okay. Give that little brain, or give brains with differing processing times, the time to take that information in. Repetition is fine. Something in those schools that you don't get is a lot of time, so I understand that as well. But if you do have the time, let's foster a nice regulatory environment for our learners. And that was the whole purpose of this video. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sitting down with me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. I hope it is helpful if you are an educator or a caregiver or just someone interested in learning about neurodiversity affirming practices, how we create neurodiversity affirming environments. It's really special and important to me, and I hope you come by again to listen to the next one. Oh, I forgot to mention that I have a website, link in bio, www.support-the-spectrum.com. You can send me questions if you'd like me to make a video about a certain topic. You can contact me for consultations or direct services. You can find my free treatment resources there, and good luck with everything!